This is Startup Renegades, a raw conversation with founders, entrepreneurs, and the unicorns among us who have taken their idea and turned it into a thriving, profitable brand. I'm your host, Shauna Armitage, and my work as a fractional marketing director has led me to connect with dozens and dozens of founders in all stages of their startup journeys. Whether they're bootstrapping or fundraising or have capital on hand, there's one big question founders always ask: how do I grow this thing? On Startup Renegades, we'll explore how they did it, and you'll walk away with actionable steps you can take on your own journey to scalable growth. Today, I am so pleased to introduce you to Annie P. Ruggles, the founder of the Non-Sleazy Sales Academy. While she's not a startup founder like a lot of the other people that I talk to on this show, she has very similar experience as I do as being on the ground with startup founders at the very beginning. She has harnessed her Hulk-like disdain for hard sales, tacky self-promotion, and overly competitive sleazeballs as inspiration to help people find better ways to grow their small businesses for almost a decade. She is the founder of the Non-Sleazy Sales Academy, and that business has helped her to guide hundreds of people towards making deeper connections, lasting impressions, and friendlier, more lucrative transactions and conversations. Now, come on, this is something that we all need in our lives. I think you're going to find Annie very refreshing, and her insights on what the startup mindset looks like to be really important in your startup journey. All right. Welcome to the podcast, Annie. How are you today?
I am swell. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited you're here. We've had some pretty great conversations around what it means to have a startup mindset, what it means to be a startup founder. So why don't we just dive right in and you can tell me about who you are and your history in the startup world.
So I am Annie P. Ruggles. I am the founder of the Non-Sleazy Sales Academy, which is on the education and training side of things. I used to be the director of marketing and sales for a software firm, so I consider myself an expat from software. But now I work with very, very small companies, like largely solopreneurs. But every now and then I get to dip the toe back into startup world, and I love it.
What was your first experience at a startup? What was that like?
Oh, God. My first experience at a startup was definitely charming, I think is the word most used, in that, it's
Charming?
charming.
Really?
Yeah, meaning it was chaotic.
I was going to say.
Yeah, it was adorably chaotic in the way that you sort of see startups depicted, right? Like sometimes everybody had everything together and we were all like energetic and everything was in flow and it was all clicking. And then other days we were like, wait, we have to do what now? Huh? Like other days it was like everything was on fire. And so we had really great flow days and really great hair on fire days. And I think that was part of the magic of the startup, though, is that it really is a crash course in making things work.
I love that. And it's so true. That's why when you said charming, I was like, you're lying to me. And I don't think you're a woman who's going to lie to me. So
no.
Was it a tech company? Was it an e-com? What was that like?
It was tech. So we were doing basically CTO services for hire and building web apps and mobile apps. And when I found my way into that world, I was coming at it from a relationship marketing background, which is still, the love of my life, relationship marketing. But it was so interesting to get to be on the ground floor of creating these brands and helping refine products, deciding what would go into an MVP, right? And all of these things. But it was really gorgeous to get in on the beginning. But then also you realize that founders, including me, we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah.
And our advisors can tell us a million things to read or do, or they can demand that we, take certain trainings or go to conferences or network a certain amount of time. But it really is startup life in a lot of ways is trial by fire.
You mentioned advisors. Do you think that those are things where you can learn from other people's mistakes and just skip over them? Or it's one of those things where you have to fail so you can fail forward?
I think it's both. I think you have to have your own share of failures so that you internalize them and process them and realize who you are when you're in struggle and when you fail. And if you have like a public embarrassment or accountability that you have to, turn around and say, this is why I failed and this is how I'm going to fix it. I think that's a really critical rite of passage. But I do think that listening to the right advisors and allowing them to guide you, if you open up and allow yourself to be coachable, you can avoid making their old mistakes, which free you up for more advanced failures. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, being coachable is key. And I think that's a key startup mindset that founders have to have, is that you don't know what you don't know, and you're going to be making mistakes for sure. But being willing to take feedback and make changes based on what other people see who have been there before is so important.
And having the steely spine not to take all feedback.
Ooh, that too. Yeah.
In that, one of the things that I saw time and 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 time again was, there's this really well thought out plan. You have great advisors on board. You find a team that you like. You hire them. The vision's coming together. You get something to alpha. Alpha's going great. And then one advisor, for whatever reason, that you've put on a pedestal, or you get one weird review from a beta tester, and suddenly, positive or negative, you come back to the team and you're like, okay, I'm changing the whole app. I'm going to add this and this and this and this and this, and it's not going to be about this anymore. Now it's going to be about that. And you're like, whoa, 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 where did this come from? And they're like, well, I got this one negative piece of feedback. And it's like, listen, boo, every time you get one negative piece of feedback, you can't throw out the whole app. Number one, that's exhausting. Number two, it's ludicrously expensive. And
Mm-hmm.
number three, that's one advisor's opinion. So look for the truth in it, see if you agree with them, and then proceed. But I would see so many people who were like, well, nope, like too coachable. Like, it's over, start over, throw it out.
Is that too coachable, or is that too easily swayed, right? You're too influenceable.
Yes.
You make a change every time you hear something from somebody instead of understanding what was just one person's opinion
Yeah.
and what is a data pattern, what you're seeing over all of the market research, right?
I think it's definitely a fear response.
Yeah.
And that's why I said, like, the failure part, getting negative feedback from people that, not even negative, critical, okay? Getting critical feedback, getting constructive criticism from people is one of the rite of passages that if that information lands on your ears on a bad day, it can be panic inducing. Absolutely. I am not without sympathy on that one. Heck no. But you have to be steely enough to say, these are the non negotiables of my product at this time. And I'm not going to change these things. I'm going to stay the course on these features. I'm going to stay the course on this value prop, and that is unshakable. But beyond that, I'm really open to feedback.
Okay, so let me turn the tables on you here, because one of the most important startup mindsets that you can have is to understanding when you do need to pivot. So at what
Yes.
point, or what red flags, what signals, what is being pig-headed, and what is taking the feedback and deciding now is the right time, or this is the right iteration to move forward?
If you are told something once, that's not feedback. If you are told something repeatedly, that is feedback. And also, you will know there are the red flags. Like, I love that question. What are the red flags? The red flags include you enthusiastically telling multiple people about what you do and they don't understand it. Now, I'm talking about people in your target market. I'm not talking about advisors in this moment. I'm talking about users. If your users are like, I don't see why this is helpful, I don't think I would use this, then yeah, if multiple users tell you that, you probably need to pivot. If when you put something out and you look at it, it looks like a facsimile of somebody else's stuff, and you realize that you've accidentally created something that already exists, then yep, probably time for a pivot. Unless you're going to reinvent it and perfect it in a way that it's going to be so different, you might want to pivot. But mostly the feeling of pivoting for the people that I know who have gone through major rebrands, minor rebrands, serial entrepreneurs who have launched thing after thing after thing, it's the need to pivot creeps on slowly but snowballs fast. You're like,
Ooh,
something's not working. Something's not working. Something's not working. It's the back of your mind. Something's not working. What is it? I can't figure that out, but something's not working.
I love that.
And then you're like, oh, bam, lightning strike. This is why I'm 2 inches too far to the right.
Okay, I love that. So it creeps up slowly and then snowballs quickly. I love that.
But it's that feeling in the pit of your stomach that's like, something's weird. It's not even necessarily bad. You're just like, like it makes your ears itch a little bit. You're like, I don't know. This isn't working. Something's not working. And the biggest tell for me, though, again, I have to repeat, is that if people in your market tell you that they don't understand why they would use your product or service, if they don't see the value, then definitely, definitely make sure that you can make that louder. If they're still not getting it, then it's time to pivot.
Well, that's so important, right? Because we mentioned advisors, and I have heard from founders that I've worked with, well, we have to change this because the advisor doesn't like it, or we have to change that because the advisor doesn't think that's a good marketing strategy, or that's not going to be stable. And I think you as a founder have to be really cautious of where you're getting advice from.
Mm-hmm.
You want to get advice from your users, from your market, absolutely. But sometimes advisors, they absolutely want to make sure if they're investors that their money is going farther faster,
Yeah.
but they might not be necessarily in the market or in the niche that you are. So they could be bringing this really high level advice to the table that may not be relevant in your situation. And you as the founder have to understand when to take that advice and when to chuck it.
I absolutely adore that. Number one, I want to point out that if your advisor is not an investor, that already puts them in a different category, right? There are advisors who are investors, there are investors, and then there are advisors. Those are three very different things because, like you said, they have different goals. But what comes to mind? A company that I got to work for briefly back when I was in software, amazing, amazing company out of Wisconsin called Mobcraft. And what Mobcraft does is they are the world's first crowdsourced brewery. And what that means is they take ideas for recipes from their audience. They have a voting system, and then their brewmasters brew and perfect whatever it is, right? If it's a salted caramel pretzel stout, whatever it is, whatever it is. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. And their beer is delicious. And they went on to Shark Tank. Now, it's very important to remember that this is craft beer. I also failed to mention that Mobcraft is based in the American capital of craft beer, known as Wisconsin. Wisconsin and craft beer are, peanut butter and jelly. They are a serious, serious combination there. And it has a serious culture there. But they went on Shark Tank and the sharks adored them. They thought it was the best concept in the world. And they were like, you know what? We're going to give you a bunch of money, but we have two things that have to happen in order for you to get this money. Number one, you have to mass produce your beer. And they're like, we're craft beer. They're like, no, but you would have to mass produce your beer. If you want our money, you have to mass produce your beer. Number two, it's cheaper to mass produce beer overseas. So you would have to pull your operation out of Wisconsin and mass produce, like what Budweiser does with InBev. Like it's owned in like a Belgian company, right? And they said no. On Shark Tank, live on TV, they said, thank you so much for your offer. They didn't even have to think it over. They said, for us, being based in Wisconsin and being a craft beer brewery are non-negotiables for us. So thank you so much for your offer. We are not willing to mass produce and to outsource to somewhere else. We are a Wisconsin company. We are a craft company, and we need to stay true to that. And I
How
was
amazing is that?
it was amazing, especially because like all of us were watching so desperately hoping that they were going to get money
Right.
because they deserved the money, you know? But if you look at it, I understand exactly to your point why they would be told in order to be quickly and massively profitable and get the investors paid back, then they have to make these big functional changes. But they were dead wrong changes for Mobcraft. And so, although we all went into it so unbelievably hopeful that the Sharks were going to take them, we went away stunned but elated to watch them be so true to themselves. And I haven't talked to Henry and the founding team in a couple of years now, but from what I can gather, they're doing just fine without those Sharks. They've expanded operations. They have multiple locations in Wisconsin, and they're killing it.
I had to just stay silent for that whole story because I was riveted. I love that story. And that brings me to another point that you and I have discussed about the whole startup mindset is the playing big versus playing small. They definitely wanted to scale, but not in a way that was against their values and their missions. And when we're talking about investors who are putting money in to see big money coming out, they're going to ask you to make changes to optimize for that.
Yeah.
But, and this is just my personal opinion, there is value to not moving that fast.
Yes.
There's value in being a startup that scales, but not a high growth startup.
Well, we've all seen the horror stories of companies that have scaled way too fast. Way too fast. And it's like watching Icarus fly basically into the sun. You're like, wow, they're on a
Greek
really
mythology.
incredible rocket, right? Hey, Greek mythology.
Greek mythology references for the win. Absolutely.
But you know, it's so interesting because you're like, whoa. To the outside eye, you're like, this company is killing it. They used to have one employee, like they just had a founder and one dev, and now like an offshore dev, and now they have like 87 devs and like a customer service team, and they've got all of this stuff, and they've got billboards now, and you're like, whoa, they're killing it. And then the bottom falls out because who knows? They hired too many people. We go into some kind of economic recession. Facebook decides to compete with them. Who knows? There's 1,000 billion things that can go wrong. But the difference is you can respond to that when you are still a lean establishment. If you're not lean anymore, if you're a really chunky major business with all of these moving parts and you owe money all over town and you have 87,000 advisors and you're responsible for putting food on the table of a whole bunch of parents of little kids, it goes nuts. Like it just explodes because you grew too quickly and didn't put the foundation in. I think that's the challenge of startup, right? And I think another part of the startup mindset is I think that it's got this kind of quick burn, build and run mentality still. And I see this less, but I still think there's a whole lot of people that are like, okay, I'm going to make this app. It's going to be brilliant. I'm going to run it for like 6 months and then I'm going to sell it to Google and make $1 gajillion. Cool.
Living the dream.
Right? Good for you. If that's the dream, and it's not that it hasn't happened. It does happen. Those are the stories that we read in Entrepreneur Magazine and Forbes and all the thing about the company that got discovered out of nowhere and acquired and blah, 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 blah. But I think if you're going into the startup already thinking about your exit, you're not doing yourself any favors.
Hey, it's Shauna. I wanted to take a quick break from this episode to remind you that Startup Renegades is on Patreon. So you can find us at patreon.com/startuprenegades. For as little as $5 a month, you can get ad-free episodes and early access to episodes before they hit the pod. But you can also tier up and join our private community, get live Q&A events with featured founders, video tutorials, lessons, and so much more. So find us at patreon.com/startuprenegades, and I can't wait to have you join us. See you there. What's the mission there? Where's the vision behind the startup? That just really sticks out to me for the craft beer company because, of course, we can't know what would have happened if they took the Sharks' money and if they had changed their operations. But my first and best guess is that they wouldn't have been nearly as, well, first of all, they probably wouldn't have been as stable a company as they are now, but they wouldn't have been nearly as successful because it was all those things. It was the craft beer, the not mass production. It was the being a true Wisconsin company, local and locally owned and sourced. Is those kinds of things that actually made people connect with them in the first place. So if they had lost all of that, then where is the vision behind the company anyway?
Then they're just another beer company.
Exactly.
If they take those things away from themselves, they're just another beer company, and they were not willing to do that. And you know what? I have no way of knowing this, but when they stood up on that international platform and said, we are craft, we are local, we are Wisconsin, I am so freaking sure that VCs and angels in Wisconsin and the right organizations were like, okay, hold on.
Jump right on that.
We got to get on this. We got to if this company wants to really rep our state, we should show up for them. I'm sure that they got some love and support after the episode. Plus, the exposure and the blah, 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 blah. But I think, what it did.
I was going to say Shark Tank is probably a really good marketing channel.
Yeah. But I think that if you stand firmly in your non-negotiables, the other thing that will happen is that you will naturally magnetize people that get it.
Yes, I love that. It's so true. So one thing that we've had all these other conversations before we actually hit the record button, but one of the big reasons I wanted to have you on the show today is because neither one of us are startup founders. We're service professionals that have worked in the startup industry. So our view is definitely a little different. And one thing that strikes me is my story is where I came from this place where I was surrounded by small business owners, which is great, props to small business owners. But there's a big difference between a small business owner mindset and a startup mindset. And to me, it's all about that scalability. You're not just trying to cover the electric bill and make sure that your staff gets paid this month. You are trying to take it to the next level and grow it and grow it. What is that ultimate startup mindset versus small business mindset mean to you?
This word got used so often, I hate it, but it is the correct word for this. The startup mindset is to disrupt. The startup mindset is to create something new and soon to be deemed essential by whoever the audience is, right? You're going to make something indispensable, new, shiny, fabulous, and it's going to change the way that human beings operate. That's the goal, really, on these companies. And as such, if you want to excite and incite giant global, behavioral change, then you are going to have to grow a lot. You are going to have to market your butt off. You are going to have to be tenacious, audacious, and all of the things that you could possibly imagine. But I think it's different when it's like, I just want to help people, which is a lot of the small business mindset. Whereas the startup mindset is more, I'm going to blow the roof off of this thing. And they have different challenges, right? So I deal with small business owners and wind up doing a lot of, relationship marketing, refocusing, making people, feel more specific, getting them honed in on their niche, blah, 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 blah. All very critical stuff. But the startup mindset, like you said, is not, I want to help people and make an income. It's, this industry is broken. Let me fix it in a big, huge way.
Absolutely. You are not in the startup world anymore. What are you doing now?
I serve small businesses. I went back to my roots. Before I was in software, I was working with small businesses, and after our software company was acquired and they didn't take me, I was like, cool, great, awesome. I'm not working in software anymore. And I basically ran back to my happy place, which is very, very small businesses.
So tell listeners the story of what you saw in that startup world that got you doing the business you're doing today, because now you teach
Oh,
sales to small
man.
business owners because of experiences that you've had in startups.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Number one, do not wait to market your product until the end.
Amen.
Oh my Lord. Like, do not do that to yourself. I don't understand how VCs, angels, and top notch, super CEOs allow people to do that. But in a lot of ways, I have seen marketing get treated like an afterthought, which is so goofy because the
Yeah.
time to start figuring out your marketing plan is not when you're launching.
Yeah.
It's not when you're going into alpha. It's not when you're going into beta. And it certainly isn't when you're having a public release. Oh, oh, oh. No, that was one of the major horror stories that I was like, nah, we got to
Mm-hmm.
get people thinking about marketing a lot earlier. Another
Yes.
thing that led me to where I am now is just the base information that, a lot of startup founders have MBAs, but some of them don't. A lot of startup founders have high domain expertise where they know everything about their industry, but they don't know anything about sales. And then suddenly they have to go in and negotiate these massive ticket offers. They got to set their pricing. They got to do all of these other things that are sales related, and they just don't know, again, what they don't know about it. So they either punt their sales decisions to somebody else, or they simply don't make them, and they get through their first several years of business with marketing and wildly changing sales practices, or they immediately outsource to a sales team that, again, doesn't really get the soul and the purpose of the company. And then, yeah.
What do you mean they don't make the sales decisions?
They just sort of wishy-washy decide them and then just keep putting it off, right? So, like, we really should look at our pricing structure. Yeah, but, we have enough users and we don't want to upset those users. So we'll just have that price point again. Well, all of our
Okay.
advisors say to raise the prices. Okay, fine. Then we'll double the prices because I just don't have time to come up with a more detailed analysis right now. Right? Because the founder has to wear 100,000 billion hats and be beholden to everybody. It's
Right.
not their fault that these things get put off, but sales is not sexy and sales is not shiny. And getting out there and talking about your product is a lot more, right? It's a lot more exciting. But I just see this idea of like, well, we'll throw marketing on like a band aid and we'll figure our sales processes out as we go, or we'll outsource as quickly as we can. And that's challenging. And another thing that I saw working in software, and by no means am I trying to knock my former home, but I did not like the way, and this was not just in my company, this was sort of company wide. I did not love the way that deadlines were treated. I did not love the way that budgets were treated. I
Mm-hmm.
did not love that founders felt very enmeshed with their team and on one day, and then the next day felt like they couldn't reach anybody. I was like, this is broken. We have project managers for this. We have community managers for this. We have client care specialists. Why are they feeling so separate? And then I was like, oh, it's because the metrics and the things that are important to them are not being equally prioritized by the company, like deadlines, like budget, like the timeline.
So, how does this all translate into the work that you do now?
Number one, I have personally implemented my own code of conduct based on a lot of mistakes I saw, like no blown deadlines. If I tell you that I am going to deliver something on time, if I have to pull an all nighter to get it done, I will. 99 times out of 100. If I have a family emergency, or like earlier this year, our roof sprang a leak and murdered my laptop. Okay, that's going to slow me down a little bit. I'm going to
Yeah.
own that. I'm going to talk to my clients and I'm going to make it right. But I'm never, ever, ever going to willy nilly, oh, well, I told them that I'd have this done today, but if I turn it in next Monday, it won't really matter. Yes, it does matter. It matters a lot. And the same thing with, the scope creep of budget. If I tell someone that a price is a price is a price is a price, then I have to honor that price. Again, unforeseen things always happen. Build that into your estimate. If anything, say, hey, I'm going to give you a higher number because I'm giving you every contingency plan in this estimate. And ideally, what I turn back to you in full will be lower than that. Fine. That's better. But don't lowball the customer and then, nickel and dime them. Oh, well, here's a fee. Here's a fee. We had to bring on an extra dev. Here's a fee. Here's a fee. No, we got to be really, really, really ethical about pricing and timelines and expectations. And we have to be so, so, so keyed in to what their actual measurements, their KPIs, their metrics that matter to them are. And I have to know that with every small business that I work with. What is the most valuable indicator of success for them? What is really going to move the needle for them? Because for some people, it is money. If I make this many sales, if I do this many tests, if I blah, 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 blah. For some people, it's not. For some people, it's like, nope, my husband or my wife makes good money and I'm just trying to make this, something profitable in the next 2 years. Okay, good. I should know that timeline. But the number one thing that I took out of software that I will carry with me forever is just the deep, deep need to understand what makes a company special, what makes it unique, and why it's necessary. If I don't know those three things, I cannot work with that client.
Yeah, so much. So tell me, what is the thing that you think founders need to hear right now?
Double down on what matters the most, but try not to be so precious about the details. If you spend your time arguing and defending minute details, you're probably wasting your energy. But that's not to say that you should throw everything out the window the first time you hear differently, right? So
Yeah.
be resolute in the things that matter. If you're Mobcraft and your craft and it's in your name and you're extremely devoted to your home state of Wisconsin, double down on loving Wisconsin, double down on being a craft beer, but don't sit there and go, well, should we do these bottles or these bottles? Or no, I think we should do this label. Well, no, okay, but I think our logo should be tan. Okay, but that's the wrong color tan. Don't get hung up in that stuff. It's
Yeah.
important, but it's fixable, it's changeable, and you're going to get a lot of that from user feedback. But before you put yourself out there for feedback, before you even shop around for the right team to help you, know what those non negotiables are, know what those pillars are. And if you don't know where to start on that brainstorm, ask, how is this not like everything else around me?
Yes. So I have to ask everybody, because this is the Startup Renegade show, what does being a startup renegade mean to you?
What being a startup renegade means to me is that I am willing to fully commit to what it is I'm building. And that is, mind, body, soul, time. I will eat, like, sleep, bleed this company within boundaries, right? I'm not trying to like get everybody institutionalized and divorced here. Like, that's not what I'm after.
Bleeding within boundaries is important.
Yes, yes. But it is that level of tenacious commitment and also the grit to know that you're going to get knocked down, but you're going to get back up. And what's going to happen at the end of this is that you're going to have something truly remarkable to show, whether that's a, warehouse inventorying app or a massage therapy school or a bakery or an app for any of those.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Annie, where can listeners find you?
The best way to start a conversation with me is either through Instagram at Anniepreneur or LinkedIn, but you can find me anytime at my website, which is AnniePRuggles.com.
Thank you so much.
Oh, it was a pleasure.
That was this week's episode of Startup Renegades. Thank you so much for joining me and soaking up all that brilliant entrepreneurial knowledge from today's guest. If you want to suggest a founder for a future episode or just want to connect, you can find me on Instagram at Shauna.Armitage. That's SHAUNA.ARMITAGE. And just a little reminder, if you liked what you heard today, be sure to subscribe and leave a review wherever you listen. It makes a huge difference and it's so important for helping the show thrive. I'll be here same time next Tuesday for a raw, honest conversation with another Startup Renegade.